Everyone is asking the same question. Will there actually be an alt season in 2025? Could it go as far as 2026? Or are we just expected to sit here and watch Bitcoin pump while all of our altcoins bleed forever? Well, after analyzing the data, the charts, and what I believe to be what's really happening behind the scenes, I think I have a solid answer. So if you're holding altcoins right now, what I'm about to say in the next 15 minutes could be a massive sigh of relief for you, and the timeline here might even shock you. So if you enjoy this video, hit that like button. Make sure if you are new and enjoy the No BS crypto content to hit that subscribe button with the bell turned on, and let's dive in. Before diving into the charts, let's look at some fundamentals that have recently happened that are really, really good for crypto, even though I'm sure many of you will argue, Kyron, we've heard these for the last 2-3 years. Altcoins haven't pumped yet. Well, again, I'm going to talk about this in just a second. So first of all, Visa, Stripe, and Fold have partnered to launch a Bitcoin credit card. Obviously, super good. More utility for Bitcoin means more people that may want to actually buy and hold it because then they can spend it. All right. We also have MasterCard over here working the Chainlink to allow anyone with a MasterCard to actually buy crypto or stable coins directly on chain. We also had the White House officially say they're ready to pass the market structure bill. Now, like this guy says, this has been pushed back multiple times now, so take it with a grain of salt, but good nonetheless. And also those 401k retirement plans in the US may be weaponized here very soon, which is obviously a lot of money. Let me break down categorically why I think that we are likely going to have an alt season. And I'm also going to show you roughly a time frame that I do think we could expect this to happen and why it hasn't already happened. This is going to be very powerful for you to know because hopefully it encourages you to look at things more objectively than follow the comments underneath YouTube videos or read crypto Twitter all day panicking. To understand why I think alt season will still happen and happen as the way I'm predicting, you have to understand why I don't think the 4-year cycle will play out this time and why it has already played out on this 4-year cycle plan already. Hang in with me. I'm not saying if you're a believer in the 4-year cycle, so you're wrong, because it could still happen. And if it does happen, great. I'm proven wrong. We all still make money. But here's my theory and why, again, I think that it could be wrong. This chart looks at the top to top, looks at the halving to top and low to top of Bitcoin's price action. It's a pretty compelling case to think that Bitcoin is going to have a 4-year cycle forever and ever and ever, where the top to the top roughly lasts, if we ignore this one, about 4 years, 1,400 days you can see here. The low to the top as well roughly gets a little bit longer every time. So back over here in the 2016 to 2017 cycle, the low to the high was 853 days. Then in the previous cycle, it was 1,060 days. And then now so far it's tracking at about 1,035 days. Lastly, the halving to the top. Again, this is the most important thing I want to mention here because the 4-year cycle is all built around this halving event. Again, ignoring this essentially, roughly 500 days from halving to top. So 518, 549, and right now we're sitting at 518 days. To understand why I think that this isn't going to play out is you have to kind of dive a little bit into how Bitcoin operates. And I think the genius of Satoshi Nakamoto, whether it's a he, she, or they, and I don't mean they in terms of one person, I mean multiple people. And that just simply is because what the halving does is it reduces the amount of Bitcoin that enters circulation every 4 years. Now, the thing is, this is great because it creates a very high stock to flow ratio, meaning that essentially Bitcoin retains its value over the course of time. It's a good thing. The issue is if no one's buying the asset, okay, there's no demand for it, then it's not going to really go up over time, is it? So liquidity ultimately moves markets. And if you have a look at global liquidity that comes from the Fed, the PBOC, BOJ, and so on, you get a pretty good idea that, hey, actually, this all works on like rate cutting. And that, in my opinion, is a glimpse into the genius of Satoshi Nakamoto, because when you think about it, this 4-year halving that people think causes this 4-year cycle, I think it was geniusly placed in the points of contraction, where beneath the midpoint here in the business cycle, okay, we have no one spending money. So what Satoshi likely has thought, at least you'd like to think it was intentional, is if I put the event here which makes pretty much Bitcoin more scarce when no one's spending money, when eventually people begin spending money, you can see here in the green periods, that likely means that when this liquidity comes into risk on markets, Bitcoin should hopefully explode in price. And so you can actually see this green period here, this expansion period happening on Bitcoin, just like clockwork. And again, these red lines here are actually the halving dates. So it really is geniusly timed. And so if we add the global liquidity cycle down here, which usually front runs the global business cycle, you can see a similar thing as well. These red lines showing the halving dates typically comes in between and before we see an expansion in global liquidity, which was this chart I was showing you earlier. And so long story long, we have a literal survey over here into the business cycle, how well a business is doing. To, again, give you a brief overview of what this looks at, it's a monthly survey that asks businesses if people are spending money. How are their products going? Are they being sold? How is delivery times? Are they profitable? How many employees do they have? It is a glimpse into the economy. Now, we also have global liquidity down here as well, which is another look into the economy. Because if we have a large flow of money into the system, that means that people likely have more money in their pockets. Both of these two things here obviously indicate why we haven't popped off yet for Bitcoin, especially altcoins. Because if we take that same business cycle, which is this here, and we have a look at this, which is the altcoins versus Bitcoin chart, you can see we've only barely just broken up now into what I would consider Altseason, okay? Up until this point, Bitcoin has been dominating altcoins because this chart's going down. When this goes up, that's when we have Altseason. But as you can clearly see, I mean, altcoins don't like going into a full-blown Altseason until we're actually in expansion, until we are above the midpoint. We haven't been above the midpoint here since October of 2022. This is very obvious on a chart like this when you also look at global liquidity. And again, this is just simply why we haven't had an Altseason. So fundamentally, I think the Bitcoin halving here was either intentionally or unintentionally placed at the right time in order to have a blow off top roughly every 4 years. But that, in my opinion, is not what actually moves the market. Wakey, wakey. I've got some big news for you. If you're someone that hates being one step behind the market and wants to make profitable trades without risking your whole entire life and getting wiped out, if you want to access free trading live streams we are doing every single Friday, taking someone from a beginner trader with no experience right through to someone who could actually trade and beat the market. If you're someone who wants to take advantage of the trades and the setups that are given to you by professional traders and get complete access to all of these tools on the left-hand column over here, live streams, trading plans, when the DCA, pot picks, airdrop guys, general chat, meme coin chat, and get rewards completely for free by just simply trading, then you need to join Level 0. You can get it, like I said, completely for free. All you got to do is just click I want free access, sign up with the steps either on Bitunix or Femex, and Bob's your uncle. You've got everything I've just explained to you completely for free. There is no strings attached. It's just you join for free, you start consuming content in a like-minded community. You have to maximize this bull run as this video is showing you right now. So what are you waiting for? Come and check out Level 0 with the links down below. With that said, let's keep it going. This is what Julian Battelle, which is like the lead macro analyst over at Real Vision, which is Raw Paul's crypto company. Essentially, he says the business cycle has been held back, like I just showed you, because rates are still too low. Rates need to come down. And so let's take this business cycle chart and apply it up here. And then down here, we're going to add the US interest rates, and you will see something pretty incredible, in my opinion. Ever since Bitcoin, which was created back over here, you'll notice that we do go beneath this midline here, which is contraction, but we don't do it for long. This one was a bit of an outlier because of the pandemic, but you can see that's probably because interest rates were actually quite low. Even over here being 2.5%, that's manageable for businesses. Businesses can still expand with roughly 2.5% as the interest rates, okay? But what happened when interest rates flew up to 3.5%, and of course at their highs maintained a rough 5.5%? Well, we've been glued beneath this midpoint in contraction. Businesses aren't expanding. The economy is slowing down. This is the answer as to why we haven't seen an Altseason yet. It's just simply because the economy hasn't been in a good spot since way back over here at the end of the last bull run. A really good way we can gauge this is looking into copper, funnily enough. Now, copper is used everywhere in an economy, all right? Mostly in the industrial sense. You can see here, 46% was used in the construction side of things, 21% in electrical and electrical products, 16% in transportation equipment, consumer and general products, 10%. So essentially, right from building houses right through to your phone, copper is used everywhere. So it's a really good gauge into how an economy is doing. If everyone's buying copper because they have to for building or to make new phones, it's going to go up. Now, if things are slowing down, what do people do? Okay, cash isn't good enough these days because most of the time you can't actually really beat inflation. Most people like to hedge with gold, another precious metal. So looking at the gold and copper ratio here, you can clearly see what is actually happening with altcoins versus Bitcoin. Okay, in times of uncertainty, we have gold, which is when this chart goes down, actually, outpacing copper. But when the economy booms, we actually have this chart going up, and it always goes up really rapidly for a set period of time, and then gold takes over again. Now, beneath it, you can see Bitcoin's chart. And again, what happens when copper goes boom, particularly when it hits this bottom trend line, then bounces up. Okay, we have essentially, call it Altseason. Bitcoin, of course, also goes parabolic because Bitcoin is somewhat still seen as a risky investment. And so we are approaching this critical point right now as we encroach upon this yellow trend line. Guys, the same patterns are obvious to me. Right through from the touch point as we sweep this level of support to bouncing up, breaking through it, touching this, coming up, going down, touching that same point again, going up, touching it. The same patterns have played out, and I've kind of drawn these yellow circles at these key points that have occurred in the last few cycles onto this cycle. And so what usually comes after this is the slow grind upwards to the eventual blow off top. Looking at the RSI on the copper to gold chart, we're actually at oversold, which is a good thing because at this key time, as we touch the yellow trend line here, we normally are in oversold territory. Okay, so if we continue down to touch this point, we'll likely go a little bit further. But I do believe once we do, and we'll eventually have a turnaround, that will be kickstarting alt season. Because essentially at that point in time, based on history, the Fed will somewhat interject, whether it's cutting interest rates. Essentially, they'll spur up the economy and copper will outpace gold once again. So going into the fact that alt season I think will still happen, looks at the 26.5-year cycle as well, which is like this 26.5-year blow-off top moment the S&P likes to have, basically just setting things parabolic. And we're already seeing that right now. No one can really believe that we are seeing so much growth for the S&P when things look so rocky. Well, I think this is part of the reason why. Essentially, every 26.5 years, as you may imagine, we have a blow-off top, which then is followed by a 50% crash. Now, the scary news is that we actually don't have just this cycle ending. We also do have an 18.5-year housing cycle that is likely to implode sometime around 2026 as well. So essentially what this may look like is the 50% drop we saw in the blow-off top in the dot-com bubble mixed with the GFC. We're talking about a pretty sizable crash here if any of these historical and reliable cycles actually play out. Now, this is expected to kind of happen. I redrew this and it ended up being around March 2027. In my opinion, giving a rough mid-2026 to mid-2027 leeway for the S&P cycle to implode. And I think a similar situation here for the housing cycle. What does this mean? Well, I do think we have an expiry date for when alt season should fully take its course. My best guess is putting a soft cap somewhere around mid-2026 and a hard cap most definitely end of 2026. I wouldn't want to be betting otherwise, but it's actually realistic and a sigh of relief for me because having a look at the copper to gold ratio from where we are right now to mid-2026, okay, we do have a reasonable time to see an alt season actually progress. It's about 273 days. Now, if we actually do extend into the late parts of 2026, which again is my hard cap, that's around 487 days from today. Now, you can see in previous cycles, we've actually exploded in a rough time frame, okay? It's roughly been 400 days here or 500 days there. Okay, 450 days here. This one was a bit longer, of course, but it is far longer and much more realistic than expecting an alt season to occur over the next 3 months if you believe in the 4-year cycle. Again, I'm not trying to crap on your beliefs, and again, it could come true, and if it does, that is great. But like I said, this is much more realistic, and so that is why I am going with it. Plus, it's also confirmed with macro trends as well. Because we don't just have the tailwinds behind us for the S&P or the housing cycle here in the winner's curse. What we also have is a $7 trillion wall of cash that could potentially find its way into crypto from money market funds. Money market funds are just ways in which institutions, big players usually like to park their cash on a short-term basis to get some of that juicy return, but Nothing crazy, of course. It's just kind of like a massive savings account. Now, unfortunately, most people in these money market funds are usually large institutions with no interest in being too risky, and retirees that usually have no intention of wanting to come into crypto. But there will likely be a small percent of these people who are investing in these that will find their way into crypto when interest rates start to fall. And I've actually mapped this chart here out for you. This is the money market funds in the top. It's currently at $7.5 trillion, which is incredible. But I have red and green colors here. What the red colors mean is at the bottom, this is the interest rates in the US. When we're above this yellow line, which is above a 2% interest rate, essentially you will see money market funds trend upwards. When interest rates fall beneath this yellow line here, which I've highlighted in green, essentially we have a slight sell-off in money market funds. Now, a slight sell-off in money market funds is a lot of money. In this case, it was $400 billion at a 20% fall. Over here, it was, 30% fall, and it was $1.1 trillion left. And over here, it was a bit less, okay, 10% drop, but still about $500 billion. And so why this is because I've roughly worked out that around a 2% interest rate, people like to get out of money market funds and probably go more risk on, okay? Because essentially when interest rates fall enough, people like to go out and look for a better return. We're at roughly 4.5% right now. So, the fact of this wall of cash, as CNBC puts it here, coming into crypto or at least leaving money market funds is highly unlikely, especially if you believe in the 4-year cycle, because we only have 2 more rate cuts or potential rate cuts, at least 2 more meetings before the end of this year, which means that have to cut by around 125 basis points in both of these meetings, because we need to shave off 250 basis points, okay, in order to actually get below that threshold. And then there normally even is about a month or 2 worth of progression before the top puts in here for money market funds and then the money starts flowing out. So like I'm trying to say, unrealistic here if you're someone believing the 4-year cycle, but if you're someone like myself who believes roughly, I think, again, soft cap mid-2026, possibly going a little bit longer, then we do have time on our side for this to actually unfold. I'm not saying that the 4-year cycle crew should get effed, or I think they're wrong because a potential money market fund, tailwind could potentially help push up my theory more. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if you believe in what I believe and the evidence in this video you think is pretty reasonable, then we do have, like I said, additional tailwinds. Nevertheless, the social metrics right now are showing that no one's in crypto, no one cares. And this is again why I believe we are due for an alt season. Because, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, we have come so far with altcoins, again, being in contraction. We haven't experienced this takeoff moment previous cycles had, sending altcoins parabolic. This down here is the altcoin others chart. Have a look at the green zones. The green zones are where we have expansion. Again, when we actually break above this midpoint here in the business cycle, look what happens, okay? From that point, we go parabolic. This is altcoins, remember that. Both times in this cycle, we saw a little breath above the waterline here in this business cycle. Look what it did, okay? It sent us parabolic. It was this pump and the Trump pump. So I urge you to think about the fact of us expanding here and what that will do for altcoins. I think we all fell for the Trump pump. We all thought that way back over here in starting October of 2024 to around December of 2024, that was the start of alt season, because going off the 4-year cycle, that was actually what was supposed to happen. We were teased with this over here from, the business cycle briefly going into expansion, but it turns out that that didn't happen because the 4-year cycle really isn't what matters. What matters is liquidity. What matters is people being able to spend money. So that will conclude this video. What I really appreciate is you spending the time out of your day to watch it this far. And if you have, I want to sincerely thank you. And I want to sincerely say, I hope you do make it this cycle. I think it's coming. So make sure to take profits. Make sure to capitalize when this thing goes bang, because I think it will. Take good care of yourselves. Talk to you tomorrow.